We've been looking at the construction of lines, and we've seen that we need to be careful on how we approach that work. Sometimes we can think of a fractal, but at other times, using a pure fractal will lead us in the wrong direction, give us the wrong answer. We've seen that Ellen White, in her commentary on histories, in many cases, many important situations, makes it hard for us to come to the correct conclusion. Gave a number of examples here that Ellen White is talking about stories at a fractal level, and what we end up doing is applying them in a different way. It's not that it's wrong to do that. It's just that we can end up making mistakes because there's a danger that we'll put undue weight upon certain characteristics. I think one of the things that we have really misunderstood is the subject of Acts 27. So when we think about Acts 27, what is the theme or the idea that you have taken away from that study? What do you think its purpose was? What was the theme or the subject or the purpose of dealing with that chapter? Does anybody have a thought? We've all studied it. Many of us have presented on the subject. So when you present on the subject, what is it that you want to explain to people? Sister Dorcas, what do you think Acts 27 is for? Why do we have an interest in that? Two ships. Two ships.
Yeah, then the first one, when they're using the first one, the first one can get problem. Then they use that ship and they add another one.
Okay, so you're given a description of the story. They have problems with the ships and they change ships. But what is the purpose of Acts 27? What's the purpose of that study? What is it designed to teach us? I don't know if Sister Emma did it in her classes. It is what I'm going to say. Or she intends to do it in the future studies. It's about explaining to people who want to teach the methodology or how we should go about doing that. If I could put you on the spot, Sister Emma. This wasn't planned. What is it that you want to say about that issue, if that was enough of a leading for you?
I started looking at it recently, and I was approaching it with the view already that it was about two institutions.
I'm not asking about Acts 27. I was asking about teaching.
Yeah, we didn't discuss it. I think
But we did.
yes. So that it's important when someone approaches a subject to know what the purpose of that subject is, what they're trying to teach the congregation.
So when you're going to approach a subject, it's critical that the teacher knows something or has a perspective. What must they know, or what perspective must they have? If you can just repeat what you said for the camera.
I think they must have a clear aim of what they're trying to teach the congregation.
They must have a clear aim of what they want to teach.
So, for instance, they might want to teach that there's going to be a final separation.
So they might want to teach there's a final separation that's about to occur.
And they need to have that aim in mind so that they get that across to the people.
And so when they do their studies, they must have that aim in mind so that they direct the study in that direction.
Because if you don't know where you're going, then how can the congregation know where you're going?
If you don't know where you're going, the congregation will have no idea. This is a common problem with teachers. If we asked one of you to come and present, besides being shy, all of us are shy, it's not because people don't know enough information, it's not because they don't know the subject. Because people say, I don't know what to say. And we would instruct them, just do the study on whatever subject it was. What they're actually trying to express is they don't know how to deliver that subject in a way that has purpose and direction, that it has an aim. And it's a really serious issue. It's what distinguishes an average teacher compared to a good teacher. They both know the subject, but the good teacher has an aim and a direction that they can take a congregation to. Did you want to add anything more to that?
You structure the presentation with an introduction, middle and end, which seems basic, but in many of the presentations we've seen, people were not able to do that or weren't doing that.
So, one of the major techniques that you would use is that in your presentation you would break it down into 3 parts. An introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And when you use that methodology, it can keep you focused upon the work that you're required to be doing. You'll have seen, if I say this, what's the answer? Third angel's message. This was the introduction. And this was the conclusion. The introduction and the conclusion always needs to be the same. And then you have the second angel in the middle. which is the substance of everything.
ate nga yalina buli kimu.
And what is the substance of everything?
Okubeera nga yalina buli kimu kitegeeza
To live a righteous, holy life.
okubeera nga oli mu bulamu obutuukirivu
Which is bookended by two warnings.
ekirimu emirundi ebiri ku ntandikwa ne ku nkomerero.
There's a warning about being righteous.
Waliwo okulabulwa kw'okubeera omutuukirivu,
There's a statement to be righteous.
waliwo okubeera omutuukirivu,
And then there's a conclusion about a warning to be righteous.
kati nekikomekereza nga kikuwa okulabolera ku kubeera omutuukirivu.
Anything else, Sister Emma? No? So, I want to add one caveat to that.
Nina akantu katono ke njagala okwongerako.
What Sister Emma has expressed is completely correct, true, and we should be putting that into practice as teachers.
Owooluganda Emma kyava okwogera kituufu era mbadde nsaba tutandika okukikozesa.
I want to clarify that that's when you do your presentation, but when you're in a teaching setting like this, there may be some diversions on that.
So, if you're doing a presentation, what we might call a sermon,
Bw'oba ogenda okusomesa,
those rules are the ones that should guide and direct us.
amateeka gano ge gateekeddwa okukulembera.
So, she's saying the same thing that I was just about to say.
Ayogedde ekintu kyekimu kye nandyetaaze okwogera,
Because in the studies that I do,
kubanga ebyokuyiga bye nkola,
many of you have experienced this, that I don't follow those rules in that didactic fashion.
bwe mba ntunuulidde engeri gye nsomesa sigoberera amateeka ago.
It appears that I make it deliberately difficult.
Era kyo birabika ng'ebikaluba.
And I expect you to know things which are not obvious.
Era nga mbeetaaza okumanya ebintu ebitali kungulu.
There is method behind that. There is reasons.
Waliwo ensonga eziri emabega w'ekyo.
The way Sister Emma just expressed it,
Ngeri Sister Emma gy'ava okukyogera,
it depends on the context or the dynamics of the study.
kisinziira ku ki ky'ogenda okuyigira.
Okay, so back to my question.
Nzizeeyo eri ku kibuuzo kyange.
What's the purpose of Acts 27?
Omugaso gwa bikolwa by'abatume essula ya 27.
Now that study was not mine.
Kakati ekyokuyiga ekyo tekyali kyange.
It was Elder Tess,
Kyali ky'Elder Tess,
and you can be pretty sure
era osobola okubeera n'obukakafu
that she followed that three-step rule.
nti yagoberera ebintu bino byonna ebisatu.
She did.
Yakikola.
She followed, she did it by the book.
Era yakikola ng'agoberera ekitabo.
And that's why I'm reasonably confident that we should know the purpose of Acts 27.
Kyobulaba mbadde njagala nsobole okutegeera omugaso gwa bikolwa by'abatume 27.
So, what's the purpose of Acts 27?
Kyekiri ku bikolwa by'abatume 27.
Why was that there? Why do we need that? We had
Lwaki
plenty of lines already.
twali tukyetaaga ate nga layini olwedde twali tuzirina.
4 lines is more than enough.
Kubanga layini ze tulina zaali zimala.
Why do we need more?
Lwaki twali twetaaga endala?
One of my sisters, there's 4 or 5 of you there? Okay.
I think Acts 27, in one sense to me, it acted as a key to the midnight cry message, in that it gave the history, the line of the institutions, and much more. It opened to us the number 273, which enabled us to unlock other events in the midnight cry message.
So my sister said Acts 27 did a lot of things for us,
Agamba nti bikolwa by'abatume 27 yakola ebintu bingi gye tuli.
which is true.
Ekituufu.
Which then goes on to Miller's Rule number 1,
Era ekitwala ku mateeka ga Miller etteeka erisooka.
so it's a bit of a trick question I'm asking,
Kati kikibuzo kye ngenda okubuuza nti nnyoddemuuko awo kati.
because if I asked you what is the important theme,
Kubanga bwe nkubuuza ki ekisinga obukulu,
depends on the subject.
kisinziira ku ki ky'oyagala okuyiga.
So my sister gave the right answer.
Muganda wange awadde ansa entuufu.
This was the line
gwali musitalo oba layini
of the institutions.
yali layini ya institution.
So that to me is pretty clear
Kati nze gyendi ekyo kitegerekeka bulungi
because it was taught correctly.
kubanga kyayigirizibwa bulungi
And most of you know that.
era abasinga kumwe mukimanyi
It's driven into you.
kyabayingira.
So let me ask you,
Kambabuuze
if you go to say here, what's the purpose? I only went to that board because I've rubbed off Matthew 13 here.
nsanguddeko Matayo 13.
That was Matthew 13.
Matayo 13
What's the purpose of Matthew 13, the parable of the tares?
omugaso gwa Matayo 13 olugero lw'ebisusunku lutegeeza ki?
DA333,
bw'osoma Desire of Ages 333
the final separation.
lutegeeza okwawukana okusembayo.
So tell me what the purpose of that study was.
Kati mbuulire omugaso gw'okuyiga okwo gwali gutegeeza ki?
No, you can't, not the final separation, no. Someone else.
Gwali tegutegeeza kwawukana kusembayo.
Someone else. My brother? My sister? To show us the work of the third angel.
Tulaga omulimu gwa malayika owokusatu.
I'm going to say no. All of the answers you're going to give are all going to be true because there's lots of things that are in that study. Wheat and tares. It's about the wheat and the tares, but I want to know the theme.
Kiri ku ngano n'ebisusunku naye njagala kumanya kiki eki.
My sister said a few minutes ago, Acts 27 is about two ships.
Omuganda nga agambye emabegako nti bikolwa 27 biri ku byombo ebibiri.
Matthew 13 is about wheat and tares, about plants.
Kale Matayo 13 biri ku bibala.
But there's an overarching truth that we want to learn from that parable.
Naye njagala tubeeko amasomo ag'enjawulo ge tuyiga okuva mu lugero olwo.
And it talks about the final separation. So we know that's the context.
Era nga twogera ku kwawukana okusembayo kubanga tumanyi bulungi bwetyo bwerambibwa olunyiriri olwo.
Now, I've done this study many times over the last 3 years.
Kati nkoze ebyokuyiga bingi emabegako.
And the reason why I think many of us wouldn't get to the correct answer
Naye ensonga lwaki ffenna tubadde tetutuukanga ku kyakuddamu kituufu
is because the way I teach is not the same way that Elder Tess teaches.
kubanga engeri gy'ensomesa si engeri y'emu Sister Tessie bw'asomesa.
Or the way Sister Emma said we should teach.
Oba nga Sister Emma bw'agambye bwe tuteekeddwa okusomesa.
3 steps.
Emitendera esatu.
So, Brother Rogers, what was your answer? The seed. Sorry? Okay. Sorry? Depends on the subject. So I've already given you the subject,
Kati already mbawadde kye mulina otunuulira.
so you should already know the answer.
Kati oteekeddwa okuba ng'omanyi
If you've been at our class,
bwe tubadde mu kuyiga kwaffe,
unless I tell you,
okuggyako nga nkugambye
hold that thought,
kwatiramuuko awo
because we're going somewhere else.
kubanga tulina ewalala we tugenda.
What should you be assuming?
Kiki oba olowooza?
It's a continuation.
Kigenda bugenzi mu maaso.
Teachers are not there to trick you.
Abasomesa tebali awo kuzanyisa.
So what's the theme or the subject of the parable of the tares?
Olugero olwo lwogera ku
We should all have shouted out.
era tuteekeddwa kubanga tukireekaana buleekaani.
How did I introduce the subject?
Engeri gye
With what
nagitandika-
study? Okay, so what's the theme or the idea of the parable of tares? 2 institutions.
Olugero olwo luli ku institution bbiri.
And how comes nobody knew that? Why did we not know that?
Lwaki ekyo twali tetukimanyi?
Because the way we conceptualize this,
Kubanga engeri gye tutegeeramu ensonga eno
it's all about who? not institutions. It's about the people, the individual. So, because we're fixated about that,
kubanga tulowooza bwe tutyo
we say, oh, this brother must be a tear and this sister must be a wheat.
tugamba nti ono owooluganda ayinza okuba kisusunku ate ono ŋŋaano.
This shut door message that we have,
buno obubaka bw'olujja okuggalwawo bwe tulina
after 30 years
nga wayiseewo emyaka 3
of practice,
nga wayiseewo emyaka 3 nga tuzze tukola practice
still is not well understood.
era tekinategeerekeka bulungi.
Now, you've seen me teach recently
Kati emabegaka mubadde mundaba nga nsomesa
3 groups.
nga nsomesa gurupu 3.
The first group
Kibinja ekisooka
is found where in inspiration?
kisangibwawa mu mwoyo w'obunabbi.
The 4 Gospels. So my brother knew the direction in which I was going.
Gurupu ekibinja ekisooka tukisanga mu njiri
This is the line of the priests.
era abo be bakabona.
We can do this.
Ekyo tusobola okukikola.
Matthew chapter 28.
Matayo essuula eya 28.
What's the commission? To go to the world,
Omulimu ogutuweebwa kugenda kubuulira njiri mu nsi,
to the Nethinims.
okugenda eri abanethanimu.
So the line could be extended,
Kati layini eno tusobola okugyongerayooko
but we'll put a break here.
naye katugimenyemu awo.
So we've got to the cross and the resurrection.
Kaakati tukimanyi bulungi tugenze ku musaalaba n'okuzuukira.
And there's this 50-day gap.
Era waliwo ennaku 5.
Where's the 50-day gap on this board here?
Ennaku 5 wano ziriwa?
Where's the 50-day gap?
Ennaku 5 ziriwa?
Where do we see the 50-day gap?
Ennaku 5 ziriwa?
Priests? 50 days.
Ennaku 5 ziriwa?
What's the beginning of the 50 days? What's that event? The beginning. Resurrection, Sunday. First day of unleavened bread. The 50th day. Okay? So tell me where it is in this story here. Shout out the dates or whatever you want to shout out. Loud, one person. 2019. Sorry, 2019 to 2021.
Okuva
Here.
19 okutuuka 2021.
Are we okay with that? We'll agree. So then we get into the book of Acts,
Ne tugenda mu kitabo ky'ebikolwa.
and the first part of the book of Acts
Ekitundu ekisooka eky'ekitabo ky'ebikolwa
is talking about what? The conversion of those thousands of Jews,
abayudaaya abaakyuka,
how the church grows
engeri ekkanisa gy'ekulamu,
when all these people join.
abantu bano bonna nga beegasse.
And in many ways it's about organisation.
Era emirundi mingi kiri ku kweteekateeka.
Stephen dies,
Stephen yafa,
Saul is converted,
Sawulo n'akyusibwa,
and then the message goes to the world.
awo obubaka ne bulyoka bugenda eri ensi.
And the epistles
Kati era ebiwandiiko bya Pawulo
are all in this history here.
biri mu kiseera ekyo kyennyini.
These are all the letters of Paul.
Awo nawe wali ebiwandiiko bya Pawulo
And these would be the Nethinims.
era awo bandibadde abanethani.
So we're familiar with that.
Kino ndowooza tukimanyi bulungi.
I've just given it from the perspective of the structure of the book of the New Testament.
Nkibawadde okusinziira ku ndagaano empya.
Then we start talking about shut doors.
Kati bwe tutandika okwogera ku nzigi ezijja ziggalwa,
And where do we see the shut door?
enzigi eziggala tuzirabawo.
Here?
Awo
Is there a shut door here?
waliwo oluggi oluggalwa.
We okay with that? Stoner Stephen? Is there a shut door here?
Waliwo oluggi oluggalwa.
Yes? So we know there's a shut door here.
tukimanyi bulungi waliwo oluggi oluggalwa.
What does the shut door actually look like?
Oluggi oluggalwa luno olufaanana luki?
Let me describe it this way,
Kyogeremuuko bwe
if I can find this quote.
kanda buba nsobola osanga ekyokuyiga kino.
I'll give you the reference in a minute, I'll just read it. In putting Christ to death, the Jews virtually destroyed their temple.
Mu kutta Kristo Abayudaaya baggalirawo ddala yeekaalu yaabwe.
When Christ was crucified,
Kristo bwe yattibwa
the inner veil of the temple was rent in twain, torn in two,
olugoye lwali mu yeekaalu lwayuzibwamu emirundi ebiri,
signifying that the great final sacrifice had been made
ekiraga nti saddaaka yali esembayo yali emaze okuweebwa
and the sacrificial system had come to an end.
era n'engeri y'okusaddaaka eggaddwawo.
Is that a shut door
Luggi luggaddwa
where you're actually opening the curtains?
bw'oggulawo kateni kasita zeggula.
Desire of Ages, page 165, paragraph 4.
Desire of Ages 165.
Is that a shut door? How do we get curtains opening equaling a shut door?
Tufuna kateni zino okweggula ate kitegeeza ki oluggi okuggalwa?
How does that work?
Kikola kiti ekyo?
Anybody got a thought?
Omuntu yenna afunye ekirowoozo?
How you explain curtains opening equals shut door?
Engeri kateni gye zeggula ate n'ogamba oluggi luggaddwa.
What's the shut door?
Oluggi luggaddwawo.
The temple
Yeekaalu
is no longer going to be used
tegenda kuddamu kukozesebwa
because the system of sacrificial offerings has ended.
kubanga okusaddaaka kukomezeddwa.
So the door to the temple has been locked.
Ekitegeeza nti oluggi lwa yeekaalu luggaddwa.
It's no longer a conduit or an avenue or a door to get to heaven.
Era tewakyaliwo oluggi olukuyingisa mu bwakabaka obw'omu.
That door had been shut.
Oluggi olwo luggaddwa.
So we've got these shut doors.
Kaakati tutunuulira enzigi zino eziggala.
Now when we think about shut doors, we think about individuals, don't we?
Kati tugamba oluggi okuggala tutera okulowooza ku bantu.
Sorry? Someone said something? Oh, okay. Let's look at Paul
Tunuulire Pawulo
at this large scale.
ku ngeri eno ku layini eno engazi.
Paul comes in here.
Pawulo ajjira awo.
Here, he wasn't Paul, was he?
Awo teyali Pawulo,
He was Saul here.
yali Sawulo.
So Paul comes in here,
Kati Pawulo ajja okutandikira awo.
and Paul becomes a symbol of the church, if I can say it that way.
Kati Pawulo n'afuuka akabonero k'ekkanisa.
Matthias
Matayo,
is one symbol,
Matiya yali kabonero akamu,
and Paul becomes another symbol.
ne Pawulo n'afuuka akabonero akalala.
I'm not trying to identify what each of those people symbolize, but they're both symbols of a church
Sigezaako kulaga buli omu kyategeeza naye kye tuyinza otegeera nti bonna bali bubonero bwa kkanisa.
that is complete.
Era obujjuvu.
Matthias becomes the 12th,
Matiya afuuka wa 12,
and Paul becomes the 12th.
ne Pawulo n'afuuka wa 12.
In essence, he would argue
Wandigambye nti
that Matthias,
Matiya
it's got me confused there. I don't know how to say it in English. Matthias. Is it Matthias? Okay. I got focus. Matthias,
Matiya
he's a fake apostle. Not genuine.
si wa mazima.
That's what Paul's argument is.
Era Pawulo kyagezaako okwogera.
We know that
tukimanyi bulungi
because everyone's calling Paul
kubanga buli omu ayita pawulo
what? A fake apostle.
kubanga tukimanyi bulungi buli omu ayita pawulo kabona omukyamu
They all say you're not a genuine apostle.
era bamugamba toli kabona
And what's his evidence?
era kiki bamugamba
Jesus came down in person and made him an apostle like everyone else.
kati ye kyabagamba nti kristo yakka wansi n'amufuula omutume
To use that argument
kati bw'okozesa okuwakana okwo
would invalidate Matthias's apostleship.
kati bw'ayogera bw'atyo kino kyanditataganyiza matiyo okubeera omutume.
Both of them are valid. I'm not trying to make the point that one isn't, but they're different symbols. That's what I want us to see. So I want to argue that Paul represents the movement as it begins to do what? Gives the message to the world. In fact, what's his job title? Apostle to the Gentiles. Doesn't understand how he's going to do that work, but God says, I will show you. So he's the apostle to the Gentiles. And every time he goes somewhere, we'll hold that thought. If I were to say, what is one of Paul's major books, one of his major epistles, I guess we could discuss or argue which one they would be. I don't know what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts? What would you consider his major epistle, or maybe his top two epistles? Romans? Ephesians? I would go with Hebrews and Romans. We get most of our New Testament theology from those two books. In many ways, the other ones are just kind of like instructive in how to behave. If you want to understand who Christ is, where would you go? You go to Hebrews. If you want to understand the 7 steps of salvation or the plan of salvation, where would you go? Romans. So that's why I would say the two major works that he has would be Romans and Hebrews. Hebrews is about whom? Christ. Romans is about whom? Romans is about whom? Us. One book is about us, one book is about Christ. Christ's nature. Who he is. Romans. Our nature, who we are. So at that level they become the same book. Nature of man, nature of Christ. You okay with that? So the two major books are those two we've mentioned. And Paul is the apostle for whom? The Gentiles. And the major works that he's going to be famous for, his famous letters, are written to whom? Jews or Gentiles? They're Jews, aren't they? They're Jewish letters.
awandiikira bayudaaya
You may not be aware,
oyinza okuba tonna kitegeera
but the book of Romans is to Jews.
naye ekitabo ky'abaluumi kigenda eri bayudaaya
He talks about them in, I think it's first person. He says like we
agamba ffe
Jews,
agamba ffe abayudaaya bw'abawanika agamba
in
ffe
contrast to those Gentiles.
Abayudaaya, era ng'abawukanya n'abamawanga.
So why is Paul
Lwaki Pawulo
spending all this energy
amala amaanyi ge gonna
teaching Jews
ng'asomesa abayudaaya
when he's supposed to be giving the message to the world?
ng'ate obubaka bwalina buwa abamawanga?
Why is that?
Lwaki?
This is a subject
Eno nsonga
that as a movement we have not taken hold of and tried to explain.
nga ffe ab'omugendo gye tutasobodde kukwata kusobola kunnyonnyola.
Let me not say that we haven't tried, but we haven't done it successfully.
Sijja kugamba nti tugezezzaako naye sijja kugamba nti omulimu tugukoze nga buteekeddwa okukola.
People have been aware of the issue,
Abantu babadde ekintu kino bakimanyiko bulungi
but we've not understood.
naye tebakitegedde.
When Paul travels,
Pawulo bw'aba atambula
he goes to a new town, what's the first thing he's going to do?
agenda mu tawuni empya kintu ki kyasooka okukola?
He's going to go to a synagogue
Agenda mu sinago
and he's going to speak to whom?
ayogere eri ani?
And he'll say something like this: seeing as you reject this message,
Kasita ogaana obubaka buno
I'm going to turn
ngenda kukyuka
to the Gentiles.
nzireyo eri abamawanga.
Lydia, what was she doing by the river?
Lidiya ki kyakola okumpi n'amazzi?
It's a worship service.
Ali mu kusaba.
What day was it? Sabbath. That's why he went there. He knew there would be worshippers there.
Ku Ssabbiiti kyova olaba yagendayo.
He has a habit of going first to the Jews,
Ayina enkola eno esooka okugenda mu Bayudaaya,
first to the church,
asooka kugenda mu Bayudaaya,
then to the world.
olumala n'agenda eri ensi.
There's so much evidence that he's doing that.
Waliwo obukakafu bungi ensonga lwaki akola ekyo.
Why is Paul
Lwaki Pawulo
sent to Caesarea?
agenda mu Sizereya?
How does he get to Caesarea?
Atuukayo ati?
He's not, okay, we could say he's rescued there, but the Romans take him to Caesarea to protect him against whom? The Jews.
Abaroma bamutwala e Sizereya basobole okumutaasa okuva mu Bayudaaya.
Why are the Jews attacking him?
Lwaki Abayudaaya baali bamulwanyisa?
Because they found him in the temple.
Kubanga baamusanga ng'ali mu yeekaalu.
What's he doing in the temple?
Yeekaalu yali akola ki?
Doing Jewish traditional rites.
Ng'akola bulombolombo bw'Abayudaaya.
Why?
Lwaki?
To keep the Christian Jews happy.
Okusobola okukuuma Abayudaaya abaali bafuuse
It's all about the church
kyali ku nsi
in this history.
mu kiseera ekyo.
Even internally in the movement,
Ne mu mugendo
they still haven't got it clear
baali tebannakifuna bulungi.
the relationship between the movement
Terunategeera bulungi kukwatagana kwa mugendo
and Adventist doctrine.
n'okukkiriza kw'Abadiventi.
But isn't there a shut door here? Isn't there?
Waliwo oluggi oluggalwa awo.
There's a shut door.
Waliwo oluggi oluggalwa.
I'll give you another story.
Kambawo olugero olulala.
Here,
Awo wennyini
after Saul has wreaked all this havoc,
nga Sawulo amaze okuleeta obuzibu bwonna awo,
he gets offered a job.
bamuwa omulimu.
What's the job offer?
Mulimu ki?
You can come on the Sanhedrin,
Osobola okujja ne weegatta ku Basanhedrin.
the Supreme Court.
Osobola okujja ne weegatta akakiiko akakulu.
And he's going to do that because of his services. He's bribed.
Kati agenda kukola ekyo
And he's going to do one major piece of work
era nga
for the
kyagenda
government.
era nga agenda kukola ekintu kimu eri gavumenti.
And what's that?
Ekyo ki?
After he's killed Stephen. Where's he going to go?
ng'amaze okutta Stephen wajja alaga.
He's cleaned up Jerusalem,
Alongosezza Yerusaalemi
stoning of Stephen.
nga akuba Stephen amayini.
Now he's going to pursue the people who have fled.
Kati agenda goberera abo abaali badduse.
Goes to Damascus,
Agenda mu Damasiko
gets converted,
n'akyuka
gets his sight back,
n'addamu n'okulaba n'alaba
and does what?
n'akola ki?
He's in Damascus. What does he do? He begins to preach to whom? The first thing he does is he begins to preach to the Jews.
Bw'amala okukyuka ky'asooka okukola kwe kuddayo atandika okubuulira Abayudaaya.
He gets the message they want to kill him,
Afuna obubaka nti baagala kumutta,
so they let him out over the wall in a basket.
kati ne bamuyisa okuyita mu kisero,
And where does he run to?
ne bamuddusa okuyita mu kisero era
It's not the
n'adduka
wilderness. He runs to Jerusalem,
adduka adda mu Yerusaalemi
and he wants to get connected to the disciples,
era ng'ayagala okwegatta awamu n'abatume,
and Barnabas becomes the conduit for that, the connection point,
era afune okwegatta nabo
but they never accept him.
naye tebamukkiriza.
That's a separate story.
Olwo lugero lulala.
He's there in Jerusalem,
Ali mu Yerusaalemi,
and what's he going to do now?
kati agenda kukola ki?
He wants to meet with people,
Ayagala kutandika
the
kusinga
Jews,
Bayudaaya
to convert them.
asobole okubakyusa.
And who does he go to?
Agenda waani?
He goes to the Sanhedrin.
Agenda mu bakulu.
He goes to the people that he was close to,
Agenda mu bakulu be yali alinako omukwano,
because they're the only people. He's the only person that could help them.
kubanga yali omuntu yekka yali asobola okubayamba.
So he's going to go to Caiaphas,
Agenda eri Kayaafa,
Annas or Ananias, depending on how you pronounce it.
ewa Ananias.
And what were those men only 3.5 years ago? What condition were they in?
Abasajja abo myaka 3 n'ekitundu emabega babadde bali ki?
What condition was Caiaphas in
Babadde mu mbeera ki? Kayaafa abadde mu mbeera ki?
when he says his blood be upon us and upon our children?
Bw'agamba nti omusaayi gwe gubeere ku ffe n'abaana baffe.
When they started chanting that,
Bwe batandika okuleekaana bwe batyo.
what condition had Caiaphas entered into?
Kayaafa yali mu mbeera ki?
Was he not demon possessed? So this is the demon possessed man here
Ono omusajja aliko emmandwa
that Paul's going to go to here
nti Pawulo agenda kujja wano
and going to try to do what?
agezeeko okukola ki?
To convert him
Agezeeko omukyusa
after 2 shut doors.
nga wayiseewo enzigi eziggaddwa za mirundi ebiri.
I'm not telling you stories that you don't know.
No sibabuulira bye mutamanyi.
What I am saying is this.
Kyengezaako bagamba kyekyo.
These stories are teaching us something that we have not understood.
Engero zino zirina ekintu kye zituyigiriza kye tutannategeera.
And it's about shut doors.
Era kiri ku nzigi okuggalwa.
God tried to show us this
Katonda agezaako tulaga ekintu kino
in 16.
mu 2:16
Study on the tears.
ng'atuyigiriza ku bisusunku.
And then he showed us,
Era n'amala n'atulaga
2 years later,
emyaka ebiri nga giyiseewo
in 18,
2:18
that this was a story of what?
kino lwe lwali lukwatagana ku ki?
The institutions.
Nga bikwatagana ne
And
institution.
the institutions are not the people.
Institution si be bantu.
By the way, when did Elder Tess begin her study on Acts 27?
Elder Tess yatandika ddi okuyigiriza bikolwa biri mu
At the same time that the study on the tears was being presented to the church.
yengeri y'emu olugero luno olw'ebisusunku lwe batandika okuyigirizibwa eri ekkanisa.
So what I want us to see,
Nina kye njagala tulabe
when we talk about shut doors,
bwe twogera ku nzigi okuggalwa
we need to be careful how we're conceptualizing them.
tuteekwa okuba nga tutegeera bulungi engeri gye tukitegeeramu.
Because we should not be understanding them, conceptualizing them in the way that others do.
Kubanga tetuteekeddwa kubanga tukitegeera ng'abalala bwe bakitegeera.
Future for America don't conceptualize this in this way.
Bitaffe America tebategeera bintu bino mu ngeri y'emu.
I don't think they even believe that there's this fifth line.
Si sisuubira oba balina n'ekirowoozo kino nti waliyo layini ey'okutanga
of institutions.
eya institution.
So when you come to this waymark here,
Bwe tujja kuwa emaaka eyo
so we have this shut door.
tulina olujja we luggalwa.
To be accurate, I'd have to do this, wouldn't I? Is that right? I'd have to have two waymarks next to each other.
Olina okubeera newo emaaka bbiri nga zeerinaanye
19 to 21.
19 paka 21
Because the shut door is 19,
kubanga oluggi luggalwa nga 19
and you go to the Levites in 21.
ne tugenda eri abaleevi 21
Will you see it as a singular point?
ja tukirabe nga wemaaka eyo
So this would be 2019,
badde 2019
and Future for America will tell you
ebifita ffe America bo ne bagamba
and themselves that this shut door means what?
nti oluggi luno lutegeeza ki.
That Michael stands up
Mikayiri ayimiridde
and that you
era mmwe
are on the wrong side of the door.
muli ku ludda olukyamu olw'oluggi luno
You are shut out
mmwe muggaddwa
and they are shut in
wabweru era bo be bali munda.
as individuals. Now, if you go back a few years,
Buddayo emyaka mitini emabega
probably before many of you joined the movement,
ndowooza nga navamu abasinga ku ffe tetunegatta ku mugendo
we used to do studies
edda twasomanga
on 2001, 9/11.
gumu
We taught
era nga tusomesa
that the leadership of the movement rejected that waymark, that truth.
nti abakulembeze b'ekkanisa baagaana amazima gano
They rejected the message of Islam.
baagaana obubaka bw'abasiraamu.
And in scriptures, Islam is symbolized by what? Sorry? An ass.
Era nga tukimanyi bulungi abayisiraamu bano akabonero ako
That's,
ke bakozesa
that's the wrong answer,
eyo ansa nkyamu
because they're also symbolized
kubanga
by an arrow.
baali bategeeza akasaale.
If you're okay with that. And in 2001,
biri gumu
all these leaders
abakulembeze bano bonna
who had visited the witch of Endor
abaali bakyalidde omukyalo oyo omulogo
entered into spiritualism.
ne bayingira obulogo
They were hypocrites,
era ne bafuuka abali b'enkwe
they were actors,
bannanfuusi
and that acting didn't help them
era n'okwefuula abakazanyirizi tekyabayamba
because they battle with the enemy and they get killed.
kubanga balwana n'omulaba era ne battibwa.
So I don't know how many of us are familiar with those studies.
Simanyi oba waliwo bameka abamanyi bulungi ebyokuyiga bino.
Because you reject the message of Islam,
Kubanga bw'ogaana obubaka bw'omusiraamu
we used to teach
twasomesanga
that these people are killed. The leaders of our movement, the kings, are killed.
nti abakulembera omugendo gwaffe battiddwa.
We have at least 3 kings.
Tulina bakabaka ba mirundi esatu.
Do you remember them?
Josiah, Sawulo ne Ahab.
I don't know if we know any more, but it's at least those 3.
Abasatu bano.
And they all do the same thing.
Era bonna bakola ekintu kye kimu.
They reject the word of God, which we call spiritualism.
Bagaana ekigambo kya Katonda kye tuyita okuyingira obusamize.
They dress up,
Ne batandika okwefuula
and they all get killed with arrows.
era bonna ne battibwa obusaale.
And Islam is symbolized by an arrow.
Era nga obuyisiraamu bulina akabonero ako ak'akasaale.
And there were people in that history
Era waliwo abantu mu kiseera ekyo
that were saying,
abaali bagamba
if they're dead,
bwe baba bafudde
that must mean the General Conference President and the conference structure, those leaders, are all dead now.
kitegeeza nti akulira general conference n'abasumba bonna bafu.
Which means close of probation. Michael has stood up for them
Kitegeeza Mikayiri ayimiridde ku lwabwe oluggi lwabwe luggaddwawo
because they saw a shut door.
kubanga baali balaba oluggi oluggalawo.
If Saul dies here,
Sawulo bw'aba afa
what is there in his family?
ki ekiddako mu famire ye?
A shut door.
Oluggi lwe luggaddwa.
Because who takes over?
Kubanga ani atwala?
David takes over.
Dawudi.
And then we had a sophisticated argument that spoke about his son, Ishbosheth.
Era twalina n'olugero olwogera ku mutabani we.
So we explained that. But this shut door that we can see,
Naye olugero luno lwe tulaba
which was the end of the house of Saul,
olwali luggalawo ennyumba ya Sawulo,
we took it to mean
twakitwala okugamba nti
we, some people,
ffe
not all of us.
si ffenna.
We saw that this was symbolizing Michael standing up against all of the leaders of Adventism.
Twalaba nti kino kitegeeza oluggi oluggale eri ekkanisa yonna ey'Abadiventi.
So we've had a bad habit
Kati twalina omuze omubi
of not understanding shut doors for quite some time.
ogw'obutategeera nzigi zino ngeri gye ziggalwamu.
So we would be here.
Twandibadde awo.
And what waymark is this? Sorry? Baptism.
Ako kubatiza.
So at the baptism there is a shut door.
Kati okubatiza kuno tugamba waliwo oluggi oluggale.
Why is there a shut door there? What does John say to all of these leaders?
Oluggi luno luggalwa kuwa
What does he call them?
abayita atya Abayudaaya baali bajja ku batirizo.
Worst of vipers,
Abayita misota.
serpents.
Agasota.
So let's give it in plain language.
Kati tukiwe mu
He
lulimi
says,
olwangu.
you're a generation of vipers,
Kati bw'agamba nti mmwe muli baana ba misota,
which means
ekitegeeza
the children of Satan.
muli baana ba Sitaani.
Does that sound like a shut door to you?
Kiwulikika ng'oluggi oluggale.
Sure it does.
Era luggi luggale.
You call people the sons of Satan, you sound like your probation is closed.
Bw'ogamba abantu nti muli baana ba misota kirabika ng'oluggi oluggaddwa.
And they've been killed by Islam,
Era nga omusiraamu abasse
and they're hypocrites,
ba bulimba bannanfuusi
and we have spiritual formation.
ate balinamu n'engeri y'obusamize.
The evidence is stacking up against them.
Kati awo bonna obwo bonna bukakafu obumala okulaga nti oluggi lwabwe luggaddwa.
So we've had these shut doors,
Kati tubadde n'enzigi zino ezijja ziggalwa.
and we've misunderstood them.
Kati nga ne tutazitegeera nga bwe tuteekezwa zitegeera.
We know that.
Tukimanyi bulungi.
Because if he says, you are the sons of Satan,
Kubanga bw'agamba mmwe baana ba Sitaani,
who's he speaking to?
agamba baani.
The leaders? Which leaders?
Agamba bakulembeze ki?
90%, 50%, 100%? All.
Agamba bonna.
It's, Saul is the leader, he's the king.
Sawulo ye kabaka.
It's all or nothing, isn't it? We're faced with a major problem then.
Kati awo ne tufuna obuzibu obulala.
Because in a few weeks,
Kubanga mu wiiki entini,
who's Jesus going to be speaking to?
Kristo agenda kukola ki?
Nicodemus,
Kati ate Kristo ye
John chapter 3.
Kristo yate ye bw'ajja n'atandika okwogera ne Nikodemo.
And he's one of these criminals here
Kati ate nga y'omu kuba oluggi lwabwe ate
that has
oluggaddwa.
already lost his salvation.
Kitegeeza olwedde ye yali takyali mu pulaani ya kufuna bwakabaka bwa buggulu.
Then he has his friend,
Alina mukwano gwe,
Joseph.
Yosefu,
He seems to escape,
alabika nga ayagala okuddukayo,
dodging the arrow.
nga adduka akasaale kano.
So we have problems in our message.
Kakati tulina obuzibu ne mu ebyo bye tubuulira.
We're misunderstanding what these shut doors mean.
Tetunnategeera ki enzigi zino okuggalwa kye kitegeeza.
So today,
Leero
people want to hear.
abantu baagala kuwulira.
I think it gives them peace.
Ndowooza kibawa emirembe.
Could Elder Jeff be saved?
Elda Jeff ananunulibwa.
People want to say, no, of course not.
bagambe nedda
It's gone too far.
tekisoboka agenze wala
It should be black and white.
ate
It should be clear cut, the difference between right and wrong.
kino kirabika bulungi ekituufu n'ekikyamu kirabika bulungi
He's gone too far.
agenze wala nnyo
There's been a separation. They're fallen into the wicked world below.
twawukanye ekitegeeza bo bagudde mu kinnya ekiwanvu
I'll refrain from naming other leading lights who used to be in the movement.
ne bagezaako n'okwogera amannya amalala awo abaali bakulira omugendo
You can put the names in.
naawe osobola oteekawo erinnya
Path of the Just, Tree of Life.
abo bonna path of the just ne tree of life
Here they were. Ministries, fellowships with their leaders.
baali awo mu nkuŋŋaana n'ababakulembera
People have taught that they're eternally lost.
kati abantu ne basomesa nti abo bo babuze bagenze
So we already have enough evidence
kakati tulina obukakafu obumala
to know
okumanya
that whatever these shut doors mean,
nti kyonna kye kitegeeza ensi gy'okuggalo
it doesn't mean that these people do not have an opportunity to be saved.
tekitegeeza nti abantu bano tebalina lukisa lwonna lwakuddamu kununulibwa
Where are we in our history?
tuliwa mu byafaayo byaffe
It depends.
kisinziira
It depends who the we are.
kisinziira ffe baani
Is this us
yeffe awo
or is this us?
oba yeffe wali
Because if this is us,
kubanga bwe tuba nga yeffe wali
and it is,
era nga bwe kiri
we're in this history here. The history of the former rain.
tuli awo we tufunira enkuba
And in the history of the former rain,
era enkuba eno esooka
we haven't even received our great test yet,
tetunnafuna na kigezeso kyaffe ekisinga obunene
according to inspiration.
okusinziira ng'omwoyo obunnabbi bwa kirambi
None of us have even been tested.
tewali n'omu ku ffe eyagezesebwa na kugezesebwa
We have to always remain anchored in inspiration.
tuteekwa okuba nga buli kaseera twesigama ku mwoyo w'obunnabbi
I know people are going to manipulate that
kati nkimanyi abantu bagenda kwata byenjogedde babinyolenyoole
and say that I'm a hypocrite
kati bagambe ndi muli wankwe
when I say, listen to inspiration.
era nga ŋŋamba muwulirize omwoyo obunnabbi kyagamba
We haven't even been tested yet.
tetunnatuuka namu kugezesebwa
And then I'm going to say,
kati awo ŋŋambe
there's no Sunday law.
kati awo teri na sandello
So they see that as hypocrisy.
kati balaba bandaba ng'omuli w'enkwe
Everyone has to decide for themselves if that is the case.
buli omu alina okwesalirawo bw'eba nga y'ensonga bw'etyo
So when we start talking about these lines of priests, Levites and Nethinims,
bwe tutandika okwogera ku layini zino ez'abaleevi ez'abanethanimu ne bakabona
what we need to remember
kyetwetwaga okujjukira
is that the close of probation
nti oluggi luggalwa
is here.
luggalwa ku eyo layini
It's not some progressive close of probation.
tekyeyongera bweyongezi nti oluggi luggala ne lugenda maaso nga lugenda lweggala
Michael stands up for everybody.
mikayiri ayimirira olwa buli omu
At that point,
ku kiseera ekyo kyennyini
now I know that there is a caveat to that,
kati nkimanyi waliwo ekirala ekigenda okujjawo
and it's this.
era kye kino
When our cases are checked,
bwe bamala okukebera keesezi zaffe
Ellen White speaks about case after case is considered
agamba buli kikolwa kyonna kigenda kikeberebwa
and the judgment is made.
era n'okusala omusango ne kukolebwa
So I understand that.
kati ekyo nkitegeera bulungi
But at the simple level,
naye ate mu kutegeera okwangu
none of that can begin before the Sunday law.
teri ku ekyo nakimu kiyinza kutandika nga tetunnatuuka ku sandelo
So whatever these closes of probations mean,
kati kyonna kye tutegeeza n'oluggi okuggalwa
especially when we say that this is the story of whom or what. This is the church,
nga tugamba nti eyo kanisa
and that's correct.
era ekyo kituufu
However, when you come to the history of the world,
ate bwe kijja ku nsi
Paul is going to do what?
pawulo agenda kukola ki?
He's going to still go to the Jews and try to bring them into the movement.
pawulo asigala alwana nga bw'asobola okugenda mu bayudaaya asobole okubaleeta mu mugendo.
So this is not as clear cut as we try to make it.
Kino tekiringa bulijjo bwe tutera okukirowooza.
It's based upon the misunderstanding of what the shut doors represent,
Ekyo kiva ku butategeera bulungi olujja okugala ki kyekitegeeza,
of what the line of Acts 27 is teaching,
oba layini ya bikolwa by'abatume 27 kyeyigiriza,
and Matthew 13,
oba Matayo 17,
whether it's institutions,
oba institution,
whether it's the subject of the wheat and tares,
oba ŋŋaano na bisusunku,
or the shut doors that we have here.
oba enzigi eziggalwa buli wamu.
These need to be understood at institutional levels, not at personal levels.
Kino kyetaaga okutegeerekeka nga oluggi luggalwa ku institution si ku ssekinnoomu.
So I hope that point is clear.
Ndowooza ekintu ekyo kitegeerekese bulungi.
So in our studies,
Mu kuyiga kwaffe
we can just summarize.
tuyinza okugezaako okufunzafunza.
What we've seen
Kye tulabye
is that we need to be careful about how we deal with fractals.
twetaaga okwegendereza engeri gye tukwatamu layini entini.
We saw that point.
Kye twakirabye bulungi.
Some stories need to be fractalized and others do not.
Engeri ezimu zeetaaga okukendeezebwa ate endala tezeetaaga.
If they're not fractalized,
Bwe ziba tezikendeezebwa,
we need to see how we combine, repeat and enlarge with progression.
twetaaga okulaba engeri gye tukwatamu engeri ebintu gye bijja byeyongera oba gye tusobola okwawulamu layini zino.
We explain the history of the past 5 years with all this model.
Tunnyonnyodde ebyafaayo ebiyise emyaka 5 emabega.
Inspiration predicts
Omwoyo w'obunnabbi aw'okulagula
that the separation will not just be rank and file members.
nti tekujja kuba kwakwawukana eri abooluganda,
It will be ministries or fellowships which have leaders.
nti kijja kuba eri enkuŋŋaana z'abantu abalina abakulembeze baabwe.
It will be people who are teachers,
Kijja kuba eri bantu ababadde abasomesa,
famous people.
abantu ababadde abeetutumu,
They're the people that leave.
be booluganda abava.
Their places are replaced by these tribes.
Era ebifo byabwe bitwalibwa tribes ezo,
And that's most of you.
era yefe abasinga wano.
We then looked at the work of the third angel,
Bwe tunuulira omulimu gwa malayika owookusatu,
and we saw how that has, we've had misunderstandings about the third angel.
n'engeri gye tubadde tetutategeera bulungi malayika owookusatu.
Out of class,
Ebweru w'ekibiina,
with quite a few of you,
n'abamu ku mmwe abatinitini,
we discussed the tension
twalabye okulwanagana
between two messengers
wakati
and 3 angels.
w'ababaka babiri ne bamalayika basatu.
We discussed that issue.
Twakyogeddeko
That in many of these stories, you don't see a third person.
nti ebiseera ebisinga oyinza obutalaba muntu wakusatu.
We need to see the relationship between the third angel and the second.
Twetaaga okulaba okukwatagana wakati wa malayika owookusatu n'owookubiri.
So we've discussed that.
Kati ekyo tukyogeddeko bulungi.
Then we've discussed
Ne twogera
how Ellen White
engeri nabbi White
often speaks about fractal histories
engeri gy'ayogera ku layini entini
and compares them with our history.
n'agezaako okuzikwasaganya n'ebyafaayo byaffe.
Fractal to non-fractal.
N'akwata history eya layini eri n'agiteeka ku layini yaffe ku layini ennene eyaffe.
And that has produced confusion in our movement,
Era awo kye kireese obuzibu mu mugendo gwaffe.
which we've now begun to deal with.
Kirandise okukwasaganya.
And then the last point that we've spoken about
Ekisembedde ddala kye twogeddeko
is the nature of shut doors.
y'engeri enzigi gye ziggalwa.
Who is the door shut for?
Oluggi luggalwa eri ani?
And you see it's shut for institutions, not for individuals.
tugenda okulaba ng'enzigi zino teziggala ku lwa ssekinnoomu wabula ziggala ku institution.
The people who are following Future for America today that can be saved,
Abantu abagoberera Future for America olwaleero bakyasobola okununulibwa
regardless of whatever they believe.
nga tetufuddeeyo ku ki kye bakkiriza.
As we think about these techniques, these rules, these methods,
Nga bwe tulowooza ku nkola zino
we need to see how they are employed by the teachers.
twetaaga okulaba engeri ki abasomesa gye basobola ozikozesaamu.
We're still learning,
Tukyayiga
and I think sometimes the teachers use these techniques and they're not even aware that they're doing so.
era abamu ku basomesa bakozesa obukodyo buno naye nga tebategeera oba naki kye bakozesa.
I appreciate some of these things are difficult to understand,
Nzikiriza bulungi ebintu bino ebimu bweziba okutegeera,
but I want to encourage us
naye njagala okubakumaakuma
as students and teachers
ng'abayizi era ng'abasomesa
to try to simplify them in a way that makes sense
tusobole okubikendeeza mu ngeri ekola amakulu,
and in a way that becomes helpful.
mu ngeri esobola okutuyamba.
Let's pray.
Tusabe.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness and your watch care. We ask and pray as we kneel before you that you would bless us with a blessing that we don't deserve but that we need. We have spent far too long not understanding the messages that you are bringing to us, the truths that you need us to understand. We've come to a time, Father, that we need to be teachers. Help each of us to be able to rise up and to fulfill our destiny. Lord, we know that there are important questions that are confronting our movement. May each of us look to the past and see how so many people have lost eternal life, lost the direction because they were not willing to see truth in its proper sphere. You are warning us now, Father, that this thing is about to be repeated. Therefore we pray that each of us would be faithful and that you would guide and direct us. In Jesus' name we pray.